The Acer Predator Triton 700 is a thin but powerful gaming laptop. It's a little older now with a 7th gen Intel CPU, but it's also got Nvidia 1080 Max-Q graphics. So let's find out how well it performs in games. Just quickly before we jump into the benchmark results, I'll cover off the specs in my unit. As mentioned, there's an Intel i7-7700HQ CPU, Nvidia 1080 Max-Q graphics, and 32GB of memory running at DDR4 2400 and dual channel. It's also got a 120Hz 1080p screen with G-Sync, although all testing was done with G-Sync disabled. It'll be interesting to see if we can get high enough frame rates to take advantage of the 120Hz screen. Other than that, I was running Windows 10 with these Nvidia drivers, slightly outdated now as the newer RTX 400 drivers came out a couple of days after my testing, but I doubt that would change anything. Fortnite was tested using the replay feature, and it was performing very well even with max settings, over 100 FPS on the averages, and the 1% lows aren't that terrible. While at lower settings, the 1% lows are around the refresh rate of the 120Hz panel, so it played very smoothly. Overwatch was tested playing in the training area, and again very good frame rates at all setting levels. The game caps at 300 FPS, and we were able to reach this at low and medium settings, while ultra settings still resulted in 1% lows above the refresh rate of the panel, so very smooth gameplay. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was tested with the built-in benchmark. I've only just recently added this game to my testing, so I'm not too sure how well it compares to other spec laptops, but the frame rates look pretty good. PUBG was tested using the replay feature, and despite this being an unoptimized and poorly performing game, we're still able to average above 100 frames per second at ultra settings. Pretty good results, and still above 60 FPS for the 1% low. CSGO was tested using the Euletical benchmark, and the results are pretty decent in this test, well above 200 FPS even with all settings maxed out at 1080p. Rainbow Six Siege was tested with the built-in benchmark, and even with ultra settings, the 1% lows are above the 120Hz refresh rate of the display. So even maxed out, it's running very well, perfectly smooth with no issues. Far Cry 5 was also tested with the built-in benchmark, and the results are fairly good for this specific test, averaging above 60 FPS in terms of 1% lows at ultra, which aren't too far behind the average frame rates, so the dips in performance aren't too low. Assassin's Creed Origins was another game that was tested with the built-in benchmark, and once more, the frame rates in this benchmark are pretty good. For comparison, at Ultra, the averages are about 35% better than the Helios 300 that I recently tested. Dota 2, on the other hand, was actually performing worse than the Helios 300, which I suspect is because it has a faster 8th gen CPU. In any case, these are the results with the Triton 700. Keep in mind it's an intensive replay and does not represent real-world gameplay. This is a worst-case scenario test. Ghost Recon was tested with the built-in benchmark, and is another resource-demanding game, still playable at ultra settings, but it was noticeably better at just about any other level. Watch Dogs 2 was also a pretty resource-demanding game, but it was running well even with ultra settings, averaging above 60 FPS, although there wasn't much practical difference between ultra and high settings. The Witcher 3 was averaging around 100 FPS at ultra settings. It was running quite well, although the 1% low result was quite a bit lower, although this could be improved quite a bit by lowering the settings. Shadow of War was tested with the built-in benchmark, and even at max settings, the average frame rates are pretty decent for this game. Ashes of the Singularity was also tested with the built-in benchmark, and the results were fairly good for this test thanks to the Max-Q 1080 graphics. Despite the Triton 700 featuring the slightly older Intel 7700HQ, which isn't even as good as the 8th gen i5 CPU, the results in all games tested are still very good, most likely owing to the 1080 Max-Q graphics. The CPU is still pretty good for gaming in any case, but in most games the graphics usually make a larger difference to performance, especially at higher settings or higher resolutions. Many games were able to get fairly high frame rates. A great combination for the 120Hz G-Sync display, which could actually be utilised well. I haven't yet tested undervolting or overclocking, as this will vary between laptops based on the hardware, but I'll cover those in future videos along with detailed temperature testing. This is just how the laptop performs out of the box in a number of different games, as this is likely how most people will probably end up using it. Don't worry though, I'll definitely cover the more advanced stuff too. So how do you guys think the Acer Triton 700 gaming laptop did in these games? As we've seen, it's running quite well in all games tested here due to the Max-Q 1080 graphics, even with good settings. Let me know what you guys thought down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the full review of the Acer Triton 700 gaming laptop, as well as future tech videos like this one.